All right, babies. Recapping for you right now. Somewhere around whatever, last episode. Let's just check that everything is all right. It's revealing itself beautifully. All right, so what the fuck? All right, I don't know why the screen sense. So, we're in this chapter three basically, where we're kind of like studying the planning and monitoring. So, the chapter is split into five parts basically. Planning business analysis approach, plan stakeholder engagement, plan business analysis governance, and plan business analysis information management. The last one is identify business analysis performance improvements. Now each one is separated. This 3.0 is just explaining things, but then at one point we get to 3.1, which is the plan business analysis approach. And that's what we did last week. This one here, see it? This is what we did in the last class. Now we're gonna do planning the stakeholder engagement. Oh my God, super sexy. Can you see it? Can you see it? Uh-huh. And we're just gonna go 3.2. We're gonna go through it, see how long it will take. And I think this is basically the standard that we're going to be approaching for the next whatever. So planning stakeholder engagements. Again, remember, what we're doing is we're planning how to do stuff. So we have to plan for the business analysis approach, as in how are we approaching things from a business analysis perspective. Remember, what we're doing is we have a case, we have a project, we have somebody was like, hey man, I don't like this in my company. Get me a business analyst. Remember, business analyst stands for BA stands for badass. So a badass comes along and goes, Mofo, I'm gonna do something about this. Here we go. And our structure a lot is basically entails us having an analysis approach, a stakeholder engagement approach, a business analysis and governance approach, a business analysis information management approach, and each one of these is specific to why it matters. And all five of them are very much necessary. And every time one of them changes, we have to refer back to the rest of them in order to make sure that like we're all still intact. And the idea is to basically kind of like create the setup for each of these approaches because we are going to be analyzing something. We're going to be engaging with stakeholders. We're going to be basically defining the actual like things that we're going to be using while we're business analyzing. And we have the information management, as in like how information is coming and going and which ones that we would want to use and which ones make sense because we can get a lot of information, but ultimately like if they don't suit the actual case, what do we do? And ultimately, performance improvements, because we as business analysts also have to reflect on how we're getting information, what we're doing, how we're planning, and all the beautiful stuff that really just require you to reflect and 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 reflect. Uh, that's why it's done mainly in teams with a lot of brainstorming, because ultimately, like, it helps when you hear other people kind of say stuff, but even if you think about them, that kind of gives you an objective perspective. Bare minimum, this is what I'm sticking for. I don't fucking care. Objective perspective. That's why we think out loud as well. Yalla, let's start. Stakeholder engagement. What's the purpose? I remember there's a certain dynamic. First, there's the purpose behind it, there's the description, and what are the inputs required and the elements required. And then after that, basically, you have the guidelines and tools and techniques you can use, who might be the stakeholders and the outputs. These 8 points exist in all of them. See, this is business analysis and governance, as well purpose, description, inputs, output, techniques, guideline tools, and all kinds of good stuff. So, shall we start? Planning stakeholder engagement. How are we? What's the purpose of planning stakeholder engagement? Well, the purpose of planned stakeholder engagement is to plan an approach for establishing and maintaining effective working relationships with the stakeholders. Hence the word engagement. But diving into detail always helps like design the bigger picture with a lot more pizzazz. No, pizzazz is sparkle. With a lot more clarity. That works. Description. Planned stakeholder engagement involves conducting a thorough stakeholder analysis to identify all the involved stakeholders. Right. At some points, you might have to actually interview or sit with CEOs, but other times, the people that are most important to the job could be the people that don't really work with the company. So you have to kind of like identify all these things. And then basically, I analyze their characteristics. That characteristics is a bit of a personal thing, but really matters because when you're engaging with people, their style of doing things is what makes them resist or support. So the result of the analysis are then utilized to define the best collaboration and communication approaches for the initiative and to appropriately plan the stakeholder risk. You get it? The idea behind this is to kind of be like, why would I want to test things when I could actually get a clear image? Now you're dealing with stakeholders and they're supposed to be smart, clear, honest, and straight to the point. Like they are people that are professionals, right? You would be fucking surprised. A lot of them are not necessarily incompetent, but like are basically only aware of certain aspects of their job, and it works. That's why inefficiency exists because we tend to just whatever. When planning for stakeholder engagement, the degree of complexity can increase disproportionately as the number of stakeholders involved in the business analysis activities increases. So the degree of complexity can increase disproportionately as the number of stakeholders. When they're saying disproportionately here, so basically you never know. This is important because new or different techniques for the management of stakeholders may be required when the engagement moves from collaborating with a few stakeholders into dozens of hundreds or even thousands of people. There is no fixed ratio, basically, they're saying, and it's not really proportionate. It doesn't really like work as in one extra that means an extra hour. No, it probably means a different structure, a different strategy, a completely different style of approach, or maybe a completely different business analysis endeavor. Because like you make a plan for one thing, but you have five stakeholders. That's limited information, right? Or that's a lot of information from key stakeholders. But what if you have to interview like employees and like let's say 50 of them? Suddenly, like whatever you're structuring has to fit these 50, which means that your approach has to change. So this makes sense. Like, have a clear mind that assessing what would fit is actually super powerful, and you don't decide beforehand. You let the information guide you. That's why we analyze. Aha, points of clarity for me. I got to start. Whoever does this and like does one of these like animated things on YouTube, give me a star here. All right, inputs. Needs, understanding the business need and the parts of the enterprise that it affects helps the identification of stakeholders. Correct. If the logistics department has like its own, if you're doing a project with logistics, again, like I'm using these. We can switch to farming if you guys want. I think I'm gonna post these videos tomorrow, actually. Yes, I'm gonna post these videos tomorrow. I know what I'm gonna do. Tomorrow I'm gonna go create a YouTube account and start posting these videos and see if I actually get some reflection. But anyways, so business analysis approach. Okay, so whatever. So needs are basically what you have to look at. Well, are the main things because like okay, let's stick to the logistics department. Or maybe let's do farming because farming seems to make sense at this point. If you're working for a project, for example, of many farms, many farmers connected to a cooperative, for example, and ultimately you could actually, your stakeholders could be the farmers or could be the people in the cooperative. But depends on the project that what the needs of the project is or what the needs, what are the desired outcomes from your involvement. So if they want to produce a lot, if they want the farmers to produce more or to sell more to them or something like this, then your stakeholders are the farmers. But if they want the logistics to be a much better, like a better operation, op the logistics system that is there to be operationally better, then your stakeholders are probably the cooperative, right? So like in the needs actually kind of like points that's like, these are the people that we want to talk to. Why? Because we need them for this need to be fulfilled. The needs may evolve as stakeholder analysis is performed. Of course, remember, at every single time they tell us something, they're going to tell us that it could change. Yeah, because being a badass business analyst is actually not something we can truly elaborate on or document. It's versatile, it changes. A business analyst in the early 1920s is not the same as a business analyst right now. Businesses have changed, the environment has changed, society has changed, the way we interact with each other has changed, the cultures have changed, evolved, traditions. Let's come back. So the business analysis approach is point number two when it comes to inputs, because we actually are incorporating the overall business analysis approach into the stakeholder analysis. Collaboration and communication approaches is necessary to ensure consistency across the approaches. Okay, so I just read this for the sake of reading this, apparently, because nothing clicked. So a business analysis approach, which is part of the inputs, is incorporating the overall business analysis approach into the stakeholder analysis. Collaboration and communication approaches is necessary. So basically, incorporating the approach, stakeholder analysis, collaboration, and communication approaches is necessary to ensure consistency across the approaches. So they're just telling us this is necessary. They haven't explained shit to us. But I'm hoping this chart would. Hey, I love it when I see charts. So plan stakeholder engagement input and output program. Input needs, output business analysis approach. Now we're at this stage. Remember this. We got it at the beginning. We got it at the first chapter. We were going through it in the first chapter. Here's the 3.1. Here we are, right? 3.1, plan business analysis approach. Here we go. If you go down a bit, oops, 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 here we go. Now we're here. We were here. Now it's defining things and it's switching them. Look at us now. We got through the needs. We understand the needs. We did the business analysis approach. Now we're looking at the planned stakeholder engagement. We have guidelines and tools, which are these here that are being described. Look at this beauty. Change strategy, current state description, and business analysis performance assessment. Remember, what they say tools, they mean we have templates of some sort which we could understand and see if we can apply. And there are many templates about this, many templates regarding this, and many templates regarding this. So planning stakeholder engagement, there's input and there's output. Naturally, input comes from these or whatever's before inputs into the front. As well, please don't forget, man, these are not really in steps. You get to decide if you want to do this one first, this one first, this one first, this one first, and how they correlate with each other. So stakeholder engagement approach, basically, tasks using this input. So from the planned analysis approach, we got input. From planned business analysis governance, which is basically what we're going to do in the next chapter, we can get inputs. All of these could actually give you input or use this output, basically, that stakeholder engagement approach. Notice how 3.1, 3.3, 3.4, 4.1, 4.2, 4.4, 4.5, 6, 6.4, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, right now, 3, 4, 5, 6. We go all the way to strategy analysis, where you assess risk and define change strategy. We're still using information from this one here. So please keep in mind that whatever you're recording is very strong and is going to basically be relied upon. And I want you to think about it as like, a building requires 5, 6 pillars in order for it to balance itself out, and each pillar takes a certain bit of the load. If a pillar is weak, then ultimately the entire building will not necessarily be stable. Now, the other pillars might be strong enough to handle it, but that's the last thing we want, is to kind of like leave it to chance. So elements, what are the elements of, I forgot what we were doing, of planning stakeholder engagement? What are the elements? First, performing the stakeholder analysis. It makes sense. Like, you analyze what the stakeholder, you perform the analysis that points what the stakeholders could be. Stakeholder analysis involves identifying the stakeholders. Wow, it's as if I just said that. Who will be directly or indirectly impacted by the change? Notice, there's not one even kind of stakeholder. There are stakeholders that want this to happen. There are stakeholders that are within the process of it happening, and there are stakeholders that are basically going to use the end product or enjoy whatever. All right. So as well as analyzing the information once collected, stakeholder analysis is performed repeatedly as business analysis activities continues. Notice they're telling you, hey, you have to do this every single time something changes, which means effectively, if you actually were to kind of like look at a business analysis from point A to delivery, every single time you take a big step or you move into a new stage, you have to reassess everything you did in order for yourself to objectively recalibrate based on new information, relevant information, more experience. Maybe your approach at the beginning lacked your presence in the project that you're doing. So the more you actually did something, your mentality changed. So you adjust basically, you go back and you look at your plan and you kind of see where like things could be different or done differently. You also could consider that you're understanding your own style of approach as you do this. So you're self-reflecting on how you're doing things. Fucking beautiful. A thorough and detailed stakeholder list ensures that stakeholders are not overlooked. Yeah, so basically, like it ensures that the people that are need to be involved are found, are involved. Understanding who the stakeholders are the impact of proposed changes, of course. Like this change, how would it impact people? Sometimes you cannot like make changes because, like I said once, you can't close a factory just because you want to switch machines. You have to figure out a solution that doesn't impact because the workers could stop working, but the factory will not actually push, which means like sales will go down. So there are a lot of things that you have to consider, but you'll figure it out because ultimately, like everything is what you're doing is you're analyzing the information around you. But as a business analyst, a badass actually just takes. I think our superpower will be actually collecting information because ultimately the solution presents itself through the information we collect. It's collecting the information, how we collect it, and where we're collecting it from. What we're collecting, how we're collecting it, and where we're collecting it from. I think these three. When we're collecting it, relevance to the market. So fuck it. Let's stick to how, where, how, who, where. Wants and expectations must be satisfied by a solution. If stakeholders are not identified, the business analyst may miss uncovering critical needs. You see, so like the key, the beauty of stakeholders is basically like they're the ones that are going to they're the reason why you're doing this. Whether they're at the beginning of the process or at the end of the process, they're the reason why you're doing this. So more of them you actually figure out, the more you understand how your product can fit everywhere. Again, your work is the product, is the value, is the value. Remember this. Stakeholder needs uncovered late will often require a revision to business analysis tasks that are either in progress or are completed. This can result in increased costs and decreased stakeholder satisfaction. How business analysts perform stakeholder analysis can vary between projects, methodologies, and organizations. A company's organizational chart and business processes can serve as an initial source of identifying internal stakeholders. Naturally, companies have information for you to actually go through. You don't have to research everything from scratch. The sponsor may also identify stakeholders. The person who gave you the job contract, hired you, interviewed you, might actually point you in a certain direction. Stakeholders outside the organization may be identified and can be uncovered by understanding any existing contracts that may be in place. So as well, like you will get help. You will get people that are involved, and you're gonna ask people around you, and you're gonna figure your way out. And some people could help. They're just here. It's just genuinely, man. I think out of the 514 fucking like pages of this crap, they can literally be like, I believe in you. Just talk to people. As well as regulatory and governing bodies that have influenced the work. Stake shareholders, customers, and suppliers are also considered when researching for external stakeholders. Great. Roles. Business analysts identify stakeholder roles in order to understand where and how the stakeholders will contribute to the initiative. It is important that the business analyst is aware of the various roles the stakeholder is responsible for within the organization. Naturally, it's not like, oh, I trust you, he's a good guy. I want to understand what you do in order to see how you fit. Great. Attitudes. This is good because now we're talking about how people are, which means we have to understand how we are and how we should be engaging with them. Stakeholder attitudes can positively or negatively impact change. Will, not can, will. Some of them are fucking cunts. Business analysts identify stakeholder attitudes in order to fully understand what may impact the stakeholders' actions and behaviors. Nice. It's just basically you have to kind of like sit with the person enough and realize their triggers and either avoid them or just kind of like be a badass and like use them to get the information you want or the outcome you want. Know how a stakeholder perceives an initiative allows an opportunity for the business analyst to specifically plan their collaboration and engagement with the stakeholder. Great. Business analysts analyze stakeholder attitudes about. All right, so basically here, business analysts analyze stakeholder attitudes about, they analyze their attitude about business goals, about business analysis in general, because some people might actually represent the fuck out of us. I had a friend of mine who was a consultant, and she was like, out of every 5 projects they do, only 2 of them are successful in terms of like the actual company implementing the work they did. Which when I asked her, I was like, that means 60% of the people, 60% of the time you fail. She goes like, no, we do our job. It's just most of the time our job entitles people, it entails people have to change or do something different. A lot of the times people just resent them for being there because that points out that they're failing at something and people never accept that. The level of interest in the change, the sponsor, like all of these are basically attitudes towards shit. Maybe like, they don't fucking like the CEO and I went through that. I was consulting for a company once, and they didn't trust the CEO. So basically, they took me being there as the CEO, getting information and trying to like take away their power or their positions and shit like this. It was a small company, man. It was very laughable from my side, but it was real for them. So like, I didn't know how to handle it without asking them to trust me. But naturally, if they didn't like the CEO, that means they didn't trust him, which means they wouldn't trust me for shit. Especially since I'm asking them to change. Collaboration and team-based approach, amazing. So basically, attitudes towards everything. Some people want to work solo, and that's the attitude they have. Stakeholders with positive attitudes may be strong champions and great contributors, naturally. And other stakeholders may not see value in the work, may misunderstand the value being provided, or may be concerned about the effect the change that will have on them. Wow. Literally every experience you have with when you're working with somebody, these are the things that you're going to be faced with. Whether, okay, so think of it as a circle with like ratios, right? Like pie charts. You literally are going to have, there's always going to be some positive emotions, and there's always going to be basically like, I'm doubting your work. There's always going to be like, what exactly would this do into the future? Like, misunderstanding the value. I'm doubting your work as in like, why are you here? What the fuck did I hire you for? Or why are you doing this? We don't need you. And the effect the change will have on them as well, because like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to do this differently, but how will my day look? And for them, maybe like in most companies, there's very much like that, not routine pattern, that loop that happens every day where people do their work, and the last thing you would want to do is fuck with their loop. But anyways, decision-making authority. Anyway, they finish this up with like people who view a change negatively may require collaboration approaches that increase their cooperation. Yeah, you're gonna have to work with people like that. Business analysts identify the authority level a stakeholder possesses over business analysis activities, deliverables, and changes to business analysis and work. So, who is the person that makes the decision? You kind of have to decide that. And sometimes you would think it's the actual manager, but managers sometimes make a decision. If the people that follow that decision don't agree with it, the decision is not really made, right? So you see managers trying to convince the people they're working with on all that drama. So like you have to that I think for me that actually is like where does what person should you convince for the decision to be easily like translated or transferred? Understanding authority levels upfront eliminates confusion during the business analysis effort and ensures the business analyst collaborates with the proper stakeholders when looking for a decision to be made or seeking approval. Level of power or influence. Understanding the nature of influence and the influence structure and channels within an organization can prove invaluable when seeking to build relationships and trust. I really like think they're taking us for fucking idiots. But I'm not sure. Maybe if somebody wants to, again, I don't know. Maybe business analysis from scratch is not really a good thing. All right, hear me out. Look at this title: level of power or influence. Now look at the first fucking sentence. Understanding the nature of influence and influence structures and channels within an organization can prove invaluable when seeking to build relationships and trust. That's literally That's literally what the title says, man. Level of power or influence. I don't know, maybe because I do this so long, man, but this is really very tedious right now for me. And it's not because of experience, it's because I think explaining things out loud or like saying things out loud kind of draws a certain picture. Anyway, so you have to understand who has power, who has influence, and the levels in order for you to basically like have an understanding the influence and attitude each stakeholder might have, can develop strategies for obtaining buy-in and collaboration, right? So basically, how to include them, when to include them, all depends on who they are and when they are. You wouldn't want to call a CEO like 5 times a fucking day. You would want to meet with him once every 2 weeks, maybe, like to give him updates or to check with them. Business analysts evaluate how much influence is needed to implement a change compared to the amount of influence the key stakeholders can bring. There is a mismatch between their influence required and the amount of influence the stakeholder has or is perceived to have. Business analysts develop risk plans, responses, and other strategies that might need to obtain the required level of support. So here, this one's interesting. If there is a mismatch between the influence required and the amount of influence the stakeholder has, so some stakeholders think they have power, but they don't, then basically you have to kind of like develop risk plans, or you have to see this beforehand in order for you to kind of like put the right documentation so they don't fail. And I think on this space, specifically on this like kind of like template, you really have to consider that your ass is on the line. And if a guy or a girl, if a stakeholder believes that he is much more than what he actually is, that might screw you over and your reputation. So to protect yourself, you kind of like do these things as well. Why the fuck not? Define stakeholder collaboration. Ensuring effective collaboration with stakeholders is essential for maintaining their engagement in business analysis activities. Right? You're defining how they're going to collaborate. You're probably also going to time it. You're managing some stuff. I don't know. Much collaboration is deliberate and planned within the specific activities and outcomes determined ahead of time during planning and activities. So, since you're working with stakeholders, they probably have schedules, and you probably have to set things up in a way that kind of like fill the gaps or fill the blanks when it comes to all of them. The business analyst may plan different collaboration approaches for internal and external stakeholders, and the approaches may differ by business plan analysis activities. The objective is to select the approaches that work best to meet the needs of each stakeholder group to ensure that and ensure their interest and involvement is maintained across the initiative. Some considerations when planning collaborations include consider timing, frequency of collaboration. Wow, I said that. Location. Yeah, it makes sense. Available tools such as wikis and online communities. All right, maybe create a group on Discord or on WhatsApp. Delivery methods such as in person or virtual and email. And preferences of stakeholders. Some people literally want to read like full documents. Planning considerations can be documented in the form of a stakeholder collaboration plan. As factors change, plans can be revisited. If it's not us that's going to revisit a plan, who will? And adjustments and adaptations can be made to ensure ongoing engagement of stakeholders. Yay. Point three, stakeholder communication needs. The business analyst evaluates what needs to be communicated. Like, I actually have needs as well, mofos, not just a stakeholder. But I think that's what we do, kind of like, that's the read between the lines. When we're actually involving ourselves with stakeholders, we're kind of establishing how we want things to be done as well, and how we operate and how we prefer things, and start finding a fit between us and them. What is the appropriate delivery method? Written or verbal, right? Like, how do you want me to deliver stuff for you? Who the appropriate audience is? Stakeholder communication needs. Yeah, so sometimes like you have information for certain stakeholders but not for others. So you kind of have to kind of like fuck, you even have to plan how what stakeholder gets what information so you don't, well, I'm sure company politics as well will be ingrained in it. But sometimes over like sending a one page versus sending five, some of them actually have to read five, but others would prefer to just read what they actually get to do. When communication should occur, frequency of communication, geographic location of stakeholders who will receive communications. Like all of these are planning on like when I'm communicating with you, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Level of detail appropriate for the communications and stakeholder, and the level of formality of communication. Sometimes it's just a fucking email, bro. while other times it's a phone call followed up by like a couple of different questions in order to make sure they still like you and you still have a job. Communication considerations can be documented in the form of a stakeholder communication plan. Business analysis build and review communication plans with stakeholders to ensure their communication requirements and expectations are met. I'm getting emotional, man, because a couple of times I got yelled at. Well, anyways, I think it's time for a break. Yeah, let's pause here. 30 fucking minutes already. All right, so I kind of messed up, and well, we'll see how it goes. I restarted this from scratch. Now we do it. All right. So guidelines and tools. We just finished with communication and what we need to do about it. Business analysis, performance assessments, provide results of previous assessment that should be reviewed and incorporated. All right, so this performance assessment is a tool that basically always comes. And it's very important for us to see if the more similar successful cases that have actually been, that have worked before, given the project that we're doing. A change strategy used for improved assessment of stakeholder impact and the development of more effective stakeholder engagement strategies. A change strategy is always based on like, what could change, what has changed, what are the things that we want to change. And current state description provides the context within which the work needs to be completed. Current state description is basically like you literally describing what's going on in order for you to get a clear idea of how you're thinking about it, basically. The information will lead to more effective stakeholder analysis and a better understanding of the impact of the desired change. Techniques. All right, so what are the techniques? I think they're the same techniques everywhere, but well, meeting with stakeholders, yeah. Brainstorming, used to produce the stakeholder list and identify stakeholder roles and responsibilities. Amazing. Business rules analysis, used to identify stakeholders who were the source of the business rules. Great, like, probably accounting rules and protocol shit. Document analysis, we review existing organizational assets that might exist in planning stakeholder engagements. Generally, these assets that they're talking about are the documentation of things. Whether it is their product, whether it is their processes, all of it counts. Interviews to interact with specific stakeholders to gain more information or knowledge about stakeholder groups. Lessons learned, we used to identify an enterprise's previous experience because like some enterprises actually mark them. Mind mapping, used to identify potential stakeholders and help understand the relationships between them. Organizational modeling, used to determine if the organization units or people listed have any unique needs and interests that should be considered. Organizational models describe the roles and functions in an organization and the ways in which stakeholders interact, which can help identify stakeholders. Like in Norway, you model the organization as you kind of draw the hierarchy and how they interact with each other. Process modeling is how we basically categorize the stakeholders by the systems that support their business processes. I think this is one of my favorites because ultimately, like, every stakeholder shows his true value based on why the business actually wants his position or her position. Risk analysis and management is used to identify risks to the initiative resulting from stakeholder attitudes or the inability of key stakeholders to participate in the initiative. Scope modeling is used to develop scope models to show stakeholders that fall outside the scope of the solution but still interact in the same way. Remember, modeling the scope is basically how far we can reach or something like this. Like, where are we looking when we're doing this? Stakeholder list map or personas depict the relationship of stakeholders to the solution and to one another. What's wrong, man? My cats are, oh, they're excited. They ate some chicken. Survey or questionnaire, basically you sell it to stuff, you send it to people. Workshops to interact with groups of stakeholders to act more information about stakeholder groups. Great. What are the potential stakeholders? Customers, external stakeholders, basically. Domain subject matter expert may help you identify stakeholders and may themselves be identified to fulfill one or more roles of the initiative. Yeah, so you probably maybe want to get some like expert in something, and they would either be a stakeholder for you to get information, or they would identify the kind of people that you'd want to look for as stakeholders. End user, a source of internal stakeholders. So an end user is basically like if you're working for a software, the end user is the employee that's going to use it, right? Or it's not necessarily an employee that's going to use it. Think about it as if it's a franchise as well, like a branch that's going to use the new software. Project manager may be able to identify and recommend stakeholders as well because he works with most of them and he's the one who kind of coordinates with them. Regulator may actually be that may require that specific stakeholder representatives or groups be involved in business analysis activities. Remember, a regulator is stronger when it comes to more government-oriented shit, like for example, medicine, pharmaceuticals. Like not everyone can do whatever the fuck they want, right? It's not how it goes though. Or finances. Sponsor may request that specific stakeholders be involved simply because he has a vision of some sort and these people he believes would actually add value. And a supplier is basically external stakeholder because like remember, even like the organization that you're working with, there's the input that goes into it and there's the output that comes out of it. And here is basically they're drawing every single stakeholders. And when it comes to outputs, the outputs of this is a stakeholder engagement approach. That's it? No. Yeah, that's it. Nice, we finished. Which contains a list of stakeholders, their characteristics which were analyzed, and a listing of roles and responsibilities for the change. It also identifies the collaboration and communication approaches the business analyst will utilize during the initiative. So to sum this chapter up, what happens is basically you have to find out who are the people that you would that whose information or interaction within the actual chain of within the chain that is required for this project to succeed. Remember, when I say this project is what you're involved in, because you're going to come in and you're going to be like, what do you need? They're going to tell you, we need this. You're going to be like, okay, for this to work, we need to find this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this girl, this girl, this girl, this girl, this girl, whatever. I don't care. Gender neutral. I'm using guy as a gender neutral term. And on top of all of that, we have to be like, oh, we need some guy from like logistics. We need some guy from sales. Oh, we need some guy from accounting. Oh, we definitely need more people when it comes to customer service. And you can make that decision based on what you want. And then you have to assess them as stakeholders and their relevance, because sometimes you can get people from customer service that just give you some information, but others see the world differently, so they explore information differently. And you never know, right? You have to make those decisions. You have to sit with these people. You have to take the time. You have to engage with them, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, when you're done, you write a documentation that goes like, these are the people we're going to work with, contains a list of the stakeholder, the characteristics which were analyzed, as in like why we chose them and how they would fit, and the listing of roles and responsibilities for the change, as in if we actually make a change, this would be in charge of this person would be in charge of that. It also identifies the collaboration and communication approaches, as in this guy will talk to him like this because he's cool. This guy's a cunt, send him an email every once in a while. Stuff like that. So the business analyst will utilize during the initiative. That basically is how we actually plan the plan in order to interact with people. And see you soon on chapter 3.3, Plan Business Analysis Governance. Bye, babies. I love you.